No hat today. Let's take our drugs. Creatine. My chest kind of sore from yesterday, but feeling much better. Not that sick anymore. Okay, Annie, what's the quote of the day?
Failure is not fatal, and success is not final.
Nice. How are you feeling today, Annie?
Good.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Aren't your legs tired?
Yes, they're cramping.
From what?
From dodgeball. Because some boys targeted me for 5 minutes straight.
Oh, are you okay?
Yes, I am.
So what was the quote you were trying to say yesterday?
Don't stop when you're tired, stop when you're finished.
Okay. Are you gonna get back at them today?
Yes.
I said the job's not finished.
Yeah, I did.
So today the workout we're doing is back. Back can take a lot of punishment. It's one of my favorite body parts to work out. Gonna start with some classic lat pull downs. This is RPE 6, and I touch the bar to my chest every single time. Pretty straightforward. Next up we got inverse grip bent over rows. I went with a pretty lightweight to focus on the contraction. Then we're going to up the weight into normal rows. This one is just normal grip, but because the weight is so much heavier, it's RPE 8. This one is really hard because it puts pressure on your legs actually. Next we got single arm row, and while I'm here, one of the most loyal viewers asked me why I wear a mouth guard in these videos or at the gym in general. So the reason is, back when I was a powerlifter, one time I went to the dentist. They took one look and they were appalled. They're like, "Do you grind in your sleep?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I grind in my sleep." But they meant, do I grind my teeth in my sleep? I wasn't sure, but they're like, "Could you possibly also be a bodybuilder?" And when I said yes, then it made sense to them. So basically, when I work out, turns out I grip my teeth really, really hard so that I can move the weight. And in my head, I thought it was perfectly fine because I'm just, biting down really hard, but apparently that puts a lot of wear on your teeth. So much so that they recommended their, $150 mouth guard. Instead, I went to Sport Check and bought a $5 moldable one, and my workouts has been intense ever since. So, long story short, I wear a mouth guard to protect my teeth. It is very unusual, and a lot of people at the gym have actually asked me. The main question they ask is, what contact sport do you play? Jokes on them, I don't play any contact sports, I just work out really hard. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Thanks for asking that. And we're just gonna finish up with chin-ups. At the end of the exercise is actually really tough. But once again, here are the workouts. Today there were 7 packages. And here's a quick portfolio update. Just added some more IDK. And at the corner of the thumbnail every day, you'll see basically the portfolio value and what I started with. And yeah, here is TeatimeTuesday. Got a long one here for you. 35 minutes long. I hope you guys have the patience to sit through and listen to my story. it kind of goes into how I got this journey started. And yeah, hope you enjoy. See you tomorrow. Tea is ready. Cheers. That's hot, so let's get started. Welcome to TeatimeTuesday. This is the second episode. Today I'm going to talk about how I lost my full-time job. Some of y'all are wondering why/how I have so much time. Well, up until 4 months ago, I was actually full-time employee. For this last 4 months though, I had a chance to reflect, and now I think I'm ready to share that story. So let's set the scene. In 2021, I graduated from University of Calgary with a Bachelor of Plant Biology. It was a honors degree, so I had to do some harder courses in order to get the honors certification. At the end of my degree, I decided that I cannot use my degree currently, so I will save it for later on. In the meantime, the project I want to take on was very capital intensive. So here I was in the middle of COVID, well, back half of COVID, needing a lot of money, like incomprehensible amount of money. So I decided to go look for a job. This was when everything was beginning to open up, and people were less scared of seeing another human being. Everyone still had to wear masks, of course. Not a fan of that tea. But through a few different job applications and trial and error, I got offered a position at a logistics company. Logistics is just a fancy word for shipping company. You can be shipped. Everything needs to get from point A to point B. So I got hired as a employee at this shipping company. Back during COVID, they were all the hype because stimulus was flowing everywhere. People were sitting at home, not doing anything. So the smart and savvy people, they started their online business during COVID because they didn't have to go into work. So for this particular shipping company, their volumes were crazy. So what that means is essentially, because they were so tied with e-commerce, it would get really, really busy from October all the way till January, February, when people were doing a lot of their Christmas holiday shopping. And e-commerce was booming like crazy. Everyone you knew had someone who wanted to do something related to e-commerce because, truth be told, that is the only business that was thriving during COVID. as people turned away from brick and mortar stores. So they really liked how I worked. I mean, I'm a naturally pretty hardworking guy, so I got the promotion to be a branch manager very early on and got assigned my own store, actually. And being a seasonal position, I would argue maybe like 4 to 6 months of the year was really busy, and then the rest of the year volumes dropped off a little bit. This wasn't that prevalent during COVID days as everyone was grinding for their e-commerce business. So as they were growing, even during down seasons, you still see a lot of volume from some of the bigger clients. So I started in 2021 in May, and last year in 2024, May marked the third year in which I worked at that company. So that's the scene that I said currently. So during the time, I started a few of my own businesses and joined other ones along the way. Some of which I still run up until this very day. And in that short 3 years of me running my businesses, I learned a lot. I never went to school officially for any kind of business degree, but I really like business because it was just a cool way to understand the world all around us. And during my business explorations, I naturally had to keep up with the markets and how the big businesses were doing. And one trend I saw very clearly was after the flow of stimulus got pulled back, a lot of consumers, after gambling away their money, had no more discretionary income, right? Because a lot of jobs were not lost, but certainly changed after COVID started. So if you think about jobs and the consumer culture of North America, then you would understand how people got addicted to the free money from COVID. And at the peak, every company was growing. Every company was booming, including some of my own clients. But that quickly changed when people realized how out of control that spending was and inflation posed to be such a big problem. This is how you saw some of the quickest rate hikes in history from the Federal Reserves in both US and Canada. And they realized that if they don't get inflation under control, people's currencies were going to become worthless. So you have stimulus pullback, and then you also have interest rates being shored up and pushed up to the highest levels people haven't seen for years. Well, what does that mean? That means people have less money to spend. So I saw this trend, and back when this company was expanding like crazy, I actually made several suggestions to my managers telling them that they shouldn't open up so many stores. When I joined the company, there was one single location in all of Alberta. I'm not going to speak for other provinces because I don't live in other provinces. But my store, the one I ended up running, was the second to open. Then they opened up a third in Calgary. And then they expanded into Edmonton. And quickly there were 2 other stores, then 3 stores in Edmonton. And finally, when all was said and done, there were 6 locations in Alberta within the span of maybe a year or 2. And they just wanted to win the market share. That was their reasoning. But I've already seen in the tea leaves that what they were doing was a mistake, and that when stimulus spending stopped, all of the e-commerce discretionary purchases were also going to stop, along with high interest rates makes it so that even regular shoppers will think twice before making a purchase. So the end result was they had to close 4 out of 6 locations in 2023 and 2024. They immediately came back to the drawing board. They were desperate. They were so desperate that the CEOs sent his brother all around to all the different provinces in order to identify points / get better ideas on how they could fix the dropping volume. But this is more like a systemic macroeconomic issue. So largely it was out of their control. The best thing they could have done was to not expand so aggressively, as I tried to suggest to my managers. This fell on deaf ears. So ultimately, they were just doing it, sending this VP around the company, talking to different people, as almost like a way to show that they're doing something. But the trip, in my opinion, was a waste of time. I gave them my genuine thoughts. I told them that in order for the business to survive, they need to change their business model because their margins were not good enough. And if you know anything about logistics, the barrier to entry is very low, right? Anyone with a driver's license can drive a truck from point A to point B. It's just about how efficient you can do it, and ultimately economies of scale. The more shipments you have, the less the overhead costs, as each individual trip costs less, as you still have to pay the same cost for most of the equipment that you have. I think I gave some good suggestions, but my underlying message was that their whole business model needs to change, and they need to look into other segments besides just what they were currently doing, which was, targeting e-commerce sellers. They did not listen to what I had to say, so fast forward, in 2024, they were projecting to lose $400,000 a month, every month, on average. And out of a 11 people team, they cut 7 out of 11 people. I was one of the lucky few who survived, but it sure did not feel good to see everyone around me get put on the chopping block, let's just say. And ultimately, because my branch was the second to be opened, there was some wiggle room, and I made the cutoff for the number of shipments. Plus, I had a big client who probably single-handedly could hold open a branch by themselves. And looking back, as per my advice, they should have stopped expanding after my branch, but they didn't listen. So we went from 1 to 6 and then back to 2. So fast forward to 2024, the beginning of 2024. I'm sitting here with scraps left of a team for Team Alberta. Remember, we had 4 people left. And honestly, looking at the business trends, it looked like maybe even my branch was going to be shut down sometime this year or next here in 2025. So I started pulling some of my business connections because although I had survived, it was my belief that I was next on the chopping block. And remember how I said I started a few businesses while working at this company? Well, one of them is with my close business partner, and for one of my main businesses that I currently work on. He knew a co-founder of a logistics company in California. So he put me in touch with her, and we started a conversation. She told me her ideas on how she wanted to enter the Canadian market from the US side up. And we talked about the industry of logistics in general. We both agreed that the barrier to entry is far too low and the market was saturated with, logistics companies. But she saw value in working with the company I worked for, and since I was already a pretty high level employee, the bridge was there for us to make a mutual connection and hopefully benefit both parties. So in the summer months, as I predicted, shipment volumes fell into the hole. Basically, they were hemorrhaging money. There were days where I would sit there for 7.5 hours doing my own projects, goofing off, doing whatever, and only working for 30 minutes to wrap up the day. And I felt bad sitting there, but management did not want to change their business model, and they were content on just running kind of like a culture business. So I had a lot of time to talk with this logistics co-founder, and I finally got them a meeting with the company I worked for. Because her English wasn't so good, their communication skills had some issues. Ultimately, upon their first meeting, nothing came out of it, and I couldn't directly intervene because I was not high enough on the corporate ladder to make my ideas known on how they could collaborate together. And keep in mind, this co-founder in LA, their warehouse was insane. Now that I visited the warehouse, I can say it's just crazy. Imagine like a football stadium put into a warehouse, and that's how big the warehouse is. The rent that they pay every month is $150,000. Just in electricity, they have to pay $20,000 in electricity bill to run this warehouse. So the figures for this LA company was insane. Now back to my company, they brushed this co-founder off, seeing no value in what they could do together. And I was really confused by this. I was thinking, you guys are literally hemorrhaging money because you cannot control your costs, and you have a bunch of employees who are not doing anything. Isn't it time that you look at other markets or new verticals that you could integrate into your business? Like if I was a business owner in that position, I would be all ears, right? So in July, I took a trip to California, LA, and I visited the warehouse. And I had already described the scale of the operations to you, so I won't go too much into that. I learned a lot. I discussed with the co-founder of that company about the company I work for, and how they could collaborate and build off of each other's strengths and weaknesses to essentially survive a potential recession. if not an overall recession, at least the logistics recession where consumers did not want to spend any money on e-commerce. So it was a short trip, just a couple days. After I came back, I started working really, really hard. I thought about the problem in many different ways. And the simplest solution for me, I thought of, was to write a proposal and express my thoughts and put them to paper and just give it to the upper echelon of management for them to consider my ideas. I still have my proposal because that is what ultimately led to me getting fired. We're getting to the finale of the story here. So I worked on my proposal, I wrote it, I proofread it many, many times, and I had my core ideas down. Essentially, with a partnership, they could use the US infrastructure to capture the US market. What that means is currently the company only operates in Canada, and in my opinion, logistics is about scale. So the big piece of puzzle that they're missing is that there's just not enough people in Canada to sustain the operations, no matter how much they grow. There's a reason why Canada Post loses so much money. It's because they have to service all of the rural, rinky-dinky little towns. And you just can't make money off of running a couple shipments out into rural areas every week, you know. So my idea essentially was to use the co-founders' infrastructure that they were already paying for and just use that as a platform to springboard into the US market and capture those new customers. And once you get your foot in the door and you have a chance to win a market that's 10 times your current market, it makes things a lot more attractive, right? So I really believed in my ideas, and they were spoken from the heart. They represented who I am as a person and what I would do in the situation. I'm a business owner of many, many businesses, so it was not like I was pulling things out of thin air. These things all made logical sense to me. So I submitted it to the team, the business development team at my current company. I should have known, but in the first initial meeting, they didn't even bother to read my proposal, my 5-page proposal, and instead chose to sit on the call and analyze it line by line with me present. Like the sheer disrespect I got shown was just crazy. So after 20 minutes of reading, they asked a couple simple questions that had nothing to do with my core ideas and just said that they will consider it with the rest of the management team. And I thought, okay, no problem. They just need some extra time. I'll take it, you know. It doesn't affect me in any big scope of things. I'm just like a middle management of a particular single store. And then at the end of the meeting, this happened on, I believe, a Thursday. At the end of the meeting, the guy nonchalantly inserts, he's like, hey, just so everyone is cool and there's no problems with HR, you mind if I run this past HR and see what they think? I was like, sure, go for it. What I didn't realize at the time was at that moment I had already been fired. I just didn't know it. It's like that meme where, you know, the main character walks past the villain and he's like, you don't know this, but you're already dead. But yeah, I came to work on Friday. Everything went as normal. I just got a email from HR, and HR said there might be some conflict of interest. We need to ask you some additional questions. Blah 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 blah. Typical HR speak. And I was like, okay. And so we hopped on a call, and immediately the HR person started grilling me. He was like, what did you mean when you said this in your proposal? Blah, 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 blah. And how do you think this affects the image of the company? I tried to answer the best way I could. And at the end of it all, he said he was satisfied and that he will make a decision for me by the following Monday. So the following Monday came, happened to be August 19th. I came at my normal, regular shift time. I was just waiting there to get started. And in comes my manager and the VP of the company. Now you might be thinking, didn't you say that they were a Canadian company? What is the VP of the company doing in Alberta? Well, he was there to fire me. So I was like, oh, I didn't expect you guys to be here. They're like, oh yeah, we just like to do these meetings in person. So then HR was remote. So HR hops on a call. My manager's in the other room. VP of the company is behind my back. And the HR person gave me the rundown. Essentially, they use conflict of interest as the excuse to terminate my employment. And all this happened over a single weekend. Essentially, they argue that because I talked to a business owner of a different logistics company, I had quote unquote spilled company secrets to them. And now I was a liability. And with the snap of their fingers, I was dealt with legally. I did not get any severance pay. So I was even worse off than my coworkers who were laid off. And yeah, from that day on, I was unemployed. Now, if you ask me what I think the real reason was, and if you're watching this, people who fired me, I think the real reason is nepotism. This whole company was run terribly from the get-go. Me, as a 25-year-old who bootstrapped my own business startups, would have done a better job running this company than whatever nonsense you guys were pulling. The reason was the founder is a billionaire, and he stacked the executive team with his family members, his friends, who had no business running a company of this size. We're talking like top 100 Canadian employers, by the way. And those people were just plain incompetent. When revenues fell off a cliff, people had to go. Instead, they just got moved to different positions and with made-up titles that didn't accomplish anything because they weren't willing to alter their core business. And that was the downfall of this business, basically. Their egos got too inflated by COVID boom that they thought they actually knew anything about business. The truth is, that couldn't be farther from the truth. Like me, with my limited experience, like I said, could have done it. They could have fired 10 out of 20 executives. By the way, why were there 20 executives running this company? They could have, each of those people probably were paid at least 6-figure salaries to just sit there and pretend to do work. they could have fired 10 of those people, saved $1 million, because 10 times 100,000 is $1 million, hired me for $200,000, and I would have fixed their business in less than 2 years. That's my best guess. But my proposal offended the higher ups because collectively they realized how badly they had ran the business into the ground. What my 5-page proposal showed to them was someone as low as I was on the corporate ladder had better ideas than the people whose only job is to come up with the ideas and whisper them into the CEO's ear. I had clowned them and shown the disgrace that they were in the business world, and they couldn't have that. So the most quick and painless solution was to just get rid of the non-conformer. And essentially, my employment of 3 years got terminated because their feelings got hurt. I stepped out of my mold that I was assigned to, and I offended the wrong people. As you can tell, I'm pretty heated about this story, but ultimately it's in the past. What we can do is learn for the future. And my message, my core underlying message to everybody is, if you are part of a company that favors nepotism, I recommend you just run. No matter how good your ideas are, how much you could help the company, your achievements and statements will be drowned out by the people closest to the CEO or whoever is in charge. And that's a sad reality, Being in Canada, the business culture, honestly, is just trash. Like, there are no actual proper businesses here. Like, they're a very select handful, but if you look at any of the big companies, their executive teams are usually stacked with like family members and friends, And it's just very toxic. Like, how are we as a country supposed to progress if, the capitalistic economy is not actually capitalistic, is not based on meritocracy, is based on nepotism and just maintaining the status quo. Like, you have a few generations of this and all of the big companies, all of the good companies will get ran into the ground. Like, the choice is simple. You either have a good business and you run it well, or you run a family business and you remain small and everything's not done by the book and you fall to the wayside as the rest of the world surpasses them. Doesn't that sound similar to the story that we as Canadians know all too well for the last 10 years? And I think this topic coincides with how Mr. Trudeau, our Prime Minister still, has decided to step down yesterday. And it's just a moment for reflection, If someone like me has to go through the ringer because I thought I had better business ideas than the people who ran the company, that speaks volumes about the business climate in Canada. And if I had a warning to everybody, it is to leave Canada. I really hope that whoever steps up next in the government can help Canada, but it's a long shot. If you have the means to, I would just recommend that you leave Canada altogether. I hate it here. You should hate it here if you have any kind of business aspirations. But yeah, on that somber note, that wraps up Tea Time with Tony, part 2. How I got fired from my 3-year-long full-time position on a whim. Cheers. See you next time.